I want to thank you for being here with us this morning or this day for a lesson upon the first day of the week. I want to begin a study or at least a series on the thought of what does my prayer life look like. So often we forget or we don't think about prayer. We don't hold it as closely as we should. And I want us to consider those things today. In Philippians, the 4th chapter and verse 6, he says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." See, God seeks for us to come to Him in prayer. He seeks for us to come and seek the help or seek that care that He can give to us. I want us to think about who God is this morning and what it means to go to Him in prayer. As Charles B. Hodge Jr. begins his book, Prayer, the Voice of Faith, he writes this paragraph: "I do not believe in prayer. I believe in God. Therefore, I pray." This simple truth explains our abuse of prayer. We fail to understand God and to understand faith. Prayer is our dependence upon God and our voice of faith. Our knowledge of God determines our practice of talking to God. The issue, simply put, is God. Sovereign, transcendent, holy, infinite, eternal, omnipotent, omniscient, just, merciful God, the creating, saving, judge God, the biblical God of Abraham and Isaac, or Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jehovah God. Any study of prayer begins with the knowledge or with a knowledge relationship with God. We must seek God, know God, trust God, obey God. Without this, prayer is nothingness. The profundity of prayer is the awesomeness of God. In other words, the profoundness of prayer is knowing or seeing the awesomeness of God. I would like to explore the subject of prayer for each one of us to consider what our own prayer life looks like. I want us to look in honesty. What is our motive? What is it we seek? Or what is the answer we want? Am I walking as I ought to be as a child of God? Is my motive what it should be? Am I seeking the answer? Am I remembering who God is? Am I willing to accept the answer when it comes? I want us to genuinely think about who God is as we begin this series. I come upon or picked out of Psalms, the Psalms 139. It is believed to have been written after the time of captivity to Babylon because of the Chaldean phrases within it. To the chief musician or choir master, there's no real knowledge of the author. He speaks of who God is within this prayer as he seeks Him. It's written by one who is genuinely seeking God. There are those it's attributed to David some of the time, but it's really put within, it is given to the musician or the choir master, that one who is in charge of those writings. But that chapter 139 tells us who God is. It's a prayer that this one prays. But I want us to think about the prayer as it is being said. What is he saying? Do we see God in this manner? Psalms 139. He said, "O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful. It is high. I cannot attain it." This idea of being an all-knowing God, the one who knows everything there is to know about us. He knows our every step, every difficulty in our life, the battles that we have with evil and our failings and our doubts. He has his eyes upon us as we walk through life, even in the simplest of things. He says, in my sitting down and my rising from sleep. In other words, in my, you might say, time of rest. And as I rise from sleep, he said, you search out my path and my laying down. You see the path I'm taking. You're looking and watching me as I lie down. The simplest of things that we don't actually take a hold of and see God as a part of that direction, which is a part of life. Yes, we take for granted what we have. He knows our every need. He knows our innermost thoughts. In 7 through 12, he says, where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning, and I dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. This idea of being there on our path, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for the darkness is as light with you. This idea of his omnipresence, his ever being with us. Not just covering one person, he's covering the world. You see, the first part of this he says, I cannot flee from his presence. His spirit is with me. In other words, there's no place that I can be hidden from God. God sees equally in the darkness. He's there in the darkness. He's there in the light. He knows where I am. You see, he knows in the darkness as perfectly as he knows in the light. Sometimes makes me think, he said, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me. In other words, when I find myself in a place of doing those things that are not right, of falling to that sin, he says, I can't be hid from him. The darkness cannot hide me if I belong to him. He knows I'm there. He sees me. We see this all-seeing, all-knowing God. You see, he's there to care for and help me and lead me and see after me each step that I take. And then in verse 13 to 16, he said, you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you. And when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. I want us to consider this idea of his power and his providence. This is what he's speaking of. That one who is the Almighty God, that one who is the provider, he cares for us. Verse 13, he says, you formed my inward parts, or you laid, the meaning of laying the foundation. He said, for each one of us within the womb. You knitted me together. You ever think about watching someone knit? They work and they bring things together piece by piece, little by little, until it comes complete. Then he speaks of the wonder of the body. Think about those things that are there. its workings. He knows the abilities of man, but he also knows the vulnerabilities. He built them in. He knows the small thing that was placed within each of us. Anything that was put upon us, anything that was put within us as we were built or modeled or whatever you might want to say, he knows about them. He saw and recorded every part of each of us, even before our existence. He saw and recorded everything. I want us to go back just a moment. In verse 14, he says, "Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well." Do we really? Do we really think about his works? You see, he's talking of more than just making me. He's talking of more than just creating me. And so often we look around and we see all that we have, we take for granted, not realizing the power of God. I want us to go over to Romans, the first chapter, and I want us to think about what he says. Just start in verse 19, he says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For the invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made so they are without excuse." But do we really see them? Do we take for granted everything that we look upon as we go outside? It's not the total meaning of that. There's more to it than just that. But to look at the sky or to look at the trees or to look at the grass or whatever it is that we might see, do we take into consideration that God created this? Not for himself, but he created it for man. As part of his providence. But we have to understand that God began to create all that was needed by mankind. He had laid out in his plan that which man would need, which was necessary for his life even eternal. He put all those things in place at the exact moment that they need to be, each one of them. See, seeing and knowing all that the world would be, or that would be needed for man to have real life through the Messiah. He provided that lineage for the Messiah to be that one that he was to be. He provided that time for him to come. He provided that cross for him to hang on, that he might be that which was a sacrifice for our sins, that which we needed to come back to God. Sometimes that is difficult for us to take hold of. We need to be able to look out and see that God is almighty, that God is all powerful, and that God provided. He is that one of providence. He made sure that each one of us have everything we need to do and to be that one that has been called to him. But think about that almightiness, that power. What he can do in my life if I give myself over to him in a prayer that is humble such as this. If I'm true and sincere. In 17, he says, "How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast are some of them. If I could count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you." Think about the thoughts, everything that God thought to put in place before creation. How we were created, what we would become, what our personalities were, what the world would need, what each one of us would have to have. But most especially, looking forward all the way into eternity. He said those thoughts there, he said, if I could count them, if I would count them, they would be more than the sand I awake, and I'm still with you. He said, I rise up, and you are still there to guide me, to lead me, to give me that which I need. You see, these verses, these next few especially, are written in a Chaldean expression, making it difficult to know exactly what is being said. But it's about creating man. It's about all the things that he did, knowing what would be needed, seeing man of being active with the lives of man. But again, he began to think of all the thoughts God must have had as he put it all in place in his creation, of all the needs that were there. All the things that he placed within his word as instructions to us that we might live in him. Go to 19 and 20. These 4 verses are really odd seeming, but I want us to think about them for a while. He said, oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Because of the way that they're written in the Chaldean, the best I can understand what is there is that God is in opposition to the wicked. As best I understand it, the thought is that God will bring the wicked to justice. He's not telling God to put them to death. He's talking about God and who he is. These were those who would stand against God and destroy the godly man. Those who would see to try to change the world to their way of thinking. 21 and 22, he said, with whom the godly have no fellowship, or this is what he's speaking of, whom the godly will have no fellowship. They set them aside. He uses this word hate very loosely, and from what I can find in the Hebrew, the thought of thought of that wicked one is an enemy. So that's what that word hate is equivalent to, his enemy. He chooses to walk with God. This one who is giving this prayer, he chooses to walk with God, separating himself from that which is an abomination to God. He says the godly man can have no fellowship with the enemy, with the wicked. And then in 23 through 24, or I want to go back just a moment, in 1 Corinthians 15:33, he says, do not be deceived, bad company ruined good morals. A very simple verse, and one whom many would say is a cliche, and yet it's not a cliche. These are God's words. We must be those who separate themselves from those things that are abomination to God, removing ourselves from being a part of that wicked man. It's not saying we don't live in the world. It's saying we have that situation where we separate ourselves from it. 23 and 24, we hear the humility of this man in prayer, his seriousness in which he approaches God, genuinely his seriousness. He said, seek me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way within me, and lead me in the way everlasting. He closes this prayer asking God to know his hearts and to know his thoughts. He's saying, look at me, search me, take a hold of my soul, and explore and say, this is where you're wrong. This is where you're right. But he seeks God in total submission to show him the rights and the wrongs that are within himself. Folks, this is serious kind of prayer. to look at God or to see God and say, God, find my faults and set them before me. I want to know my rights, but find my faults and set them before me. You see, when one hates the abomination of evil within a man, one is very close and can come into the danger of hating the man himself. But he seeks God that he would lead him to worship in the pure spirit. He tells him, see if there are any grievous ways within me. And then he says, and lead me in the way everlasting. Lead my life as a life of worship, a life of seeing, a life of knowing, to walk and worship in spirit and truth. I want us to understand the composition nor the author matter, but the humility in which the one offers these words to God. He realizes who God is. He sees God as all-knowing and as all-present. He sees God as that one who is all-powerful and is willing to provide and has provided all that is needed. He sees this God with all sincerity. He sees him in such a manner that he refuses to follow in the ways of the wicked. He seeks God to show him what is right and what is wrong and to correct him, even to the point of rebuking him. He seeks to follow in truth and spirit. There are many things that we ought to observe as we seek God in prayer. As we look into these things, I hope that will bring each of us to a closer relationship with God, creating a greater prayer life. But the first part of prayer life is to know who my God is. Sincerely know. And that place faith, not in the prayer, but in God. Knowing that that prayer is the first part of our action, the necessity for us to accept the answers and walk and seek to do. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, he said, rejoice always, pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Our bringing ourselves rejoicing to God and praying each step of the way is the will of God. This giving thanks for all circumstances where I find myself. God knows. God is there. He knows where we're headed. He knows what's happening, and he knows what we can do. And he knows that he has put before us that which we need, that provision to do his will. See, we all need to seek a closer relationship to God, because that relationship we have to God is how serious our prayer life will become. I hope that these thoughts and the thoughts over the next few weeks will help us look at ourselves, help us build ourselves, help us look at our prayer life and see that it can be much stronger, that it can be much better, and that that relationship with God will do nothing but continue to build greater and greater. I want to thank you for being here with us this morning, and may God bless.